Thank you for joining us for Workforce Development. We are delighted to have you with us today. My name is Kim Moore, and I am with the law firm of Clark Hill. I have been a labor and employment lawyer for more than 25 years. I know, I can't believe it either. Well, thank you, I appreciate that. I'll take the compliment. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview of what we've planned here today and let this distinguished panel introduce themselves. But first, a quote. If you want to make something happen, you have to make people able to do it and make them want to. That was Dr. Stephen Kerr. He was the Chief Learning Officer of both GE and Goldman Sachs. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you do that. Enable people and make them want to do it. Today we're going to talk about benefits, both what's required at this state and federal level, because those are sort of the bottom line things, but then also what are the expectations of employees? How do you attract talent? Once we attract it, what do you do about engagement of your employees, whether you have one employee in the United States or like our friends at EY here, thousands of employees, because those are some different challenges. What role does culture play in that? What role does brand play in that? And that can be both individual brand and company brand. What about technology in workforce development? That's a big one. And then what are the questions that we get asked most often? So that's the overview of what we want to talk about today as a panel, but we hope to have some time for some questions about what do you want to talk about today. All right, I'm going to let these talented folks introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their expertise.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Jackie P. Taylor. I am a partner with Ernst & Young, and I've got about 20 years experience in the human resources and technology realm, a little bit of a hybrid skill set. I've spent time in the private sector leading global HR and technology initiatives, and currently my role is as the leader of our government and public sector activities. So translating a lot of that private sector experience to mission-oriented organizations in the state and local, federal, and higher education space. Very happy to be here.
I'm David Langdon. I'm a senior policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Commerce. I have actually about 20 years of experience in the federal government as an economist and as a policy advisor to Democratic and Republican cabinet members. And my policy portfolio includes workforce policy issues as well as statistical, IP, and economic development policy. I look forward to chatting with everybody.
Good morning. My name is Joanne Farquharson, and I feel like I should say that I have 95 years of experience, just so this beautiful panel. I am a U.S. expansion advisor and global general manager for Foothold America. We are a U.S. company, but we're owned by a U.K. company. And our story happened about 10 years ago when they thought, let's expand to the U.S. And they did. And they said, gosh, this is confusing and expensive. And Foothold was born to help other organizations expand. My background is in benefits, insurance, risk management. I owned a firm in the U.S. for 15 years, and I now live outside of London and love it there. But I'm a bit of a translator for our clients so that they can understand sort of how, demystify how the U.S. works. And then I'm a little closer to other time zones. So.
All right, let's jump in. Joanne just talked about her expertise in benefits, so I'm going to let her get us started with the benefits question. And in particular, let's talk about what benefits are required in general at the federal level, and we're going to talk only generically about what states require. And that's because, as you probably know, each state can decide a lot about what it wants to do as far as wage requirements, as far as paid time off. And so if you're situating employees in a particular state, you need to make sure you know what that state requires.
Great. I'll start by saying I've primarily worked with SMEs. So if you think from the perspective of a small entrepreneur and what they need to do. So oftentimes at the federal level, there isn't a requirement to have certain benefits. Now, organizations of a certain size would need to offer health insurance, for example, in order to avoid fines. But interestingly, pensions, retirement plans in the US, known as 401k. So if you've never heard that term, 401k means you're talking about retirement benefits. So it's not actually required. However, when an employer decides to put a benefit in place, that's when the rules come in. So anti-discrimination, and rules will vary from state to state. So it becomes quite complicated. And just because something isn't required doesn't mean it isn't very important. It would be very challenging to hire U.S. workers without a robust benefits package. And again, that varies dramatically from size of company. And especially with unemployment so low, it's tough to find those candidates. And it's especially important for international companies coming to the US, because if you imagine from the perspective of a US employee, they go, okay, I'm now working for a UK or Chinese or Australian company, and I'm the only employee. What do they know about me? And when you understand benefits and you say, we're going to treat you like you're used to being treated, the benefits you're used to having, that goes a long way for their comfort.
So let's talk a little bit in terms of employee expectations and magnified opportunities and benefits, Jackie, and what it is that would attract employees, retain employees, different kinds of things we've seen as far as educational benefits.
Right. Yeah, I think just to tack on to Joanne's comment around what's expected, I think in addition to the health and welfare benefits, it's expected that employees in the U.S. are going to be able to hone their skills. And so I think educational reimbursement, continuing education, as well as internal learning and development opportunities are going to be really, really important. Another benefit, a series of benefits that I think are important to consider are the softer benefits, like the ways of working. So this could be virtual work, telework. I think in this day and age, there's an expectation that there will be some workforce flexibility. We also have multi-generations in the workforce, individuals who are taking care of their children as well as taking care of their parents. So your time off plans need to be supportive of that flexible workforce. And I think a culture, your internal organizational culture of entrepreneurship will help you retain and attract the talent that we have in the pipeline today.
That's helpful. Dave, would you like to add to this topic?
So I would add that on the training side, it's very much the view that employers are partners, I think, with the U.S. education and school system on helping workers progress throughout their careers. So from preparing workers for entry-level jobs up to helping them progress into what their next employment might be. And that's increasingly so. Federal policy is very much looking at lifting up the company role, what companies are actually spending on the workers, learning about their successful training models. And so they're an important cog in the education, labor, and sort of business sphere around training in the U.S.
In addition to benefits, because that's just one component, what can an employer or company do to attract employees, particularly when we need a specific kind of employee, a high-tech employee, when we're competing against others for a really necessary employee? How do we go about doing that?
So I would say, especially in the public sector at this point, a lot of our technology advancements and our technical roles are actually the same types of roles that our private sector counterparts are looking to attract talent for. And so it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that we are, our culture on the inside is reflected on the outside. So something even as simple as how we post the positions and jobs. One of the typical fail points that we have at times in the sector is posting analyst number 2457 or administrator 2. And you have to think about the talent that you're looking to source and how they read that. They don't want to be considered a number. They don't just want to be a cog in the wheel. And so I think it's important to, at the beginning of your job postings and tracking the talent, explain what your organization is about and how your employees are going to get value in their career. And quite frankly, just from a personal perspective, what value they'll get from the role. And then go into the position description. Get them excited about it so that they feel like they're joining an organization that they can be proud of.
And in addition to that, just the posting part of it, it's very important for international companies to make sure you're asking during the interview process about a person's ability to work remotely or to be just one of a few. Very often, international companies they're just placing one employee, and that person may be business development, helping to funnel work back to the home country. And it's not everyone can work remotely, and that's a big part of when you're searching for talent, what you're looking for. Another thing that happens frequently is that international companies are aware of some cities and that those cities are hubs. So they might say to me, for life science companies, I need to be in Boston or the Bay. For pharmaceutical companies, I need to be in New Jersey, financial, New York. And that's fine, but there's so much more out there, and those hubs tend to become very expensive. So it's useful to evaluate, and you can do this, or we do this for our clients, but there are databases out there, so you know just because you pay someone in your home country this amount, it could be that you're going to pay this amount in the US, and then you're going to pay for the benefits on top of that. So keeping your expectations open and going to advisors in the US so that when you go to find them, you can find the right fit, which is oh so important for your first one or two, well, always, but especially if you're counting on this person to be your US person.
Dave, do you want to talk about attraction?
I mean, what I would say is there's the branding element to it. I mean, companies, you're becoming invested in your local communities, whichever cluster or area you choose, and I think the sooner you sort of become part of that community and get your name out there, it'll help with recruiting, both the physical presence and also online through social media, to be frank, and platforms is maybe something like LinkedIn. I mean, it really does matter to be where the job seekers are looking. Yeah.
If I may just piggyback on that, when it comes to getting involved in communities, there are many economic development organizations within states, regions, cities, and you'll notice them here at this summit, and they are there to support you. So being connected with them is an automatic link to the community, and they're really wonderful resources.
Now let's move into engagement and the role of brand once we've attracted this talent. Once you have the right, you believe you have the right employee, and you either have one person who you've talked about, and that person may be an island, or you have an EY employee that you're excited about, and it's one of 1,000 employees. How then do we keep that person energized and excited and doing the right thing? How do we do that? What are the components of then developing that person so that they become a 25-year employee and not a 6-month employee?
So I know at EY we have 260,000 employees globally, and in some locations you've got really large clusters of individuals, but we do have those geographies where we've got a smaller population in an office. And so this concept of employee engagement is still something that we are very deliberate about. I think purpose, it's sometimes an overused term, but really translating our vision is building a better working world. And we work really hard to translate that into what every single individual at the firm does, whether you're in my group around people advisory type services, in our audit practice, or in our assurance practices. We all translate our day-to-day into building a better working world. Where you have an opportunity, you do teaming activities, you do philanthropic activities together. We have a day where we do sustainability projects, and entire offices go into schools or participate with Habitat for Humanity. And those things are not aren't taken lightly by the employees. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. And quite frankly, for our millennials and Gen Z talent, that is a major factor for them determining where they work and where they stay.
Dave?
Working at a large employer like the U.S. Department of Commerce, with I think a fraction of EY, and we have 47,000 employees. And I think a lot of the factors are pretty much the same, really. I mean, humans are humans, people are people, and the feeling of needing to be engaged is the same wherever you're working. But I mean, I will say that there's something to be said for, I think, for like the single employees about having the personal touch and regular contact with the home office, and understanding that they are part of a much larger organization, and finding ways to sort of integrate them into whatever the sort of the root culture is for the company.
Well, Foothold America has 5 employees. So it's a completely different situation, but the way we keep engaged is we're all remote, and we have weekly meetings, and they're video, and they're interactive that way. So at one point, this was with our parent company, I didn't even realize when I met one of the employees from the parent company that I hadn't actually met her before, because we had done so much with video. We felt part of the same team. So I think putting that kind of structure in place helps people feel connected. And again, as a small company, we're doing a retreat to France with spouses, and it'll be a little work and a little play, and that will bring the team together as well. And one other thing I think is important, especially for a small company. If you look on my LinkedIn page, you'll see we're hunting for a marketing manager position. We're no longer taking resumes, by the way, and this will be a UK-based person. But this person, for us, will be junior level and will be the marketing department. So how do we keep this person interested in growing with Foothold? Because we've noticed on CVs that people in that particular industry are jumping after a year or so, and we really need someone to be more engaged. And we've identified a very senior marketing professional who will serve as a mentor for this person. And when we've been through the interview process and we've said that that's what we intend to do, they've been very excited about that. So we have someone that helps to steer our person and help them grow, and that person has the expertise that's outside of our little group. And I think some of the other things that were said, educational opportunities, things like that, go a long way.
One of the things that's been really significant for us, we have 25 offices, we have a lot of lawyers, is feedback. And it's honestly, it's candid feedback and an opportunity then to learn from it. People, particularly, I don't think it's just lawyers, I think it's any professional, I think it's any person, they crave to know how they're doing. How am I doing in my role? Am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? How could I do better in this? They don't just want to sort of be out there just kind of not knowing. So opportunities for even more than annual feedback, but on a more routine basis to say, this is where you're doing things well, this is where you could do things a little bit better, you know, in a nice way. You don't have to be unkind about it. But then it's if this is their chosen thing, they feel like they're having that ongoing opportunity for growth. We've had people leave where they say, I never felt like I understood that I was making progress or that I knew that I was going forward. So just another thing to sort of throw into the mix of an ongoing thing to retain people once you have good talent. The other thing I would say in that is, at least in our realm, people also want to progress. They don't want to stay in the same spot. They want to be able to take on the next thing. They want an opportunity for growth. They want an opportunity to be able to move up. They want your job, right? So if they're sort of stuck, then they don't see where they can move into the next thing. So you've got to give them the voice to say, okay, where do you see yourself in 3 years or 5 years? Because if it's not there, they're going to go find it.
That is such a great point, because it is incumbent upon us as employers then to do succession planning. How many times have we had someone in a role doing a great job and you just wish they could stay there just doing a great job? And that's, to your point, not meeting their needs as an employee. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're having someone in the backdrop to succession plan to replace them so that they can take on another role. The other great point that you made around feedback is also an opportunity area. We really need individuals, especially when you have a smaller employee population, to be innovative, to be creative, to be those boots on the ground. But in order to do that and spawn that excitement and support it as a leader, you've got to allow people to fail. They've got to be able to make mistakes and feel like they can recover from it. And so when you're giving that feedback, there's an opportunity to praise a mistake as long as they're learning from it and moving forward. The minute that feedback becomes punitive, you have stunted the creativity of your teams. And so I just can't emphasize enough how important that feedback cycle is.
All right. We've talked a lot about how to retain our good employees. So let's talk, we talked a little bit about brand in there. We didn't differentiate, though, and I liked this discussion in our preparation between the brand of the employer and the individual brand. And this was something I honestly hadn't really thought about enough until this panel was bringing up that distinction. So I'd like for you guys to talk about that, because both are important and I think both are interesting.
I'll take a jump in. So personally, I have worked for relatively small companies my entire career. I like that feeling. I like the feeling of making a difference, and I guess my perception is that I might get lost in a large organization. However, there are times when we think, well, bigger is better, and it may be easier to attract employees when you have a brand that people recognize. And our clients often are a little bit worried about that. So they're like, well, how can I attract from another company? I need these skilled people, but they're all in, the Northrop Grummans or whatever. So I think it's important to identify where people feel comfortable, and that may be different places at different times. One of my key colleagues is from a very large consulting firm, and now she's working remotely. And that was part of what she wanted to do through her career, and we see that with others as well. So I think part of your communicating your brand is who are you, not just the company name and the logo and even the mission, but culture from the perspective of size of company is also important. Right?
And I think that when we had the conversation, it was around really that distinction between being your customer and what your brand is if I am your customer and purchase your product, versus what it's like to be a candidate interested in your organization or working for you. So when you think about your employer brand, you're answering the question, what is it like to be in the throes and work within your organization? What would it feel like? What would my day-to-day look like? To your point, Joanne, is it more familial and, it's like working, with an extended family? Is it the ultimate of large-scale corporate organization where you can kind of climb the ladder or work across geographies? Do you team? Do people work and kind of focus on their areas? I think those are all really important questions that your candidates who are looking at potential careers within your organizations are going to ask.
And echoing off of that, I think there are multiple. The brand is for multiple audiences, right? So there's like you said, there's the consumer brand if it's a consumer product, but on the recruiting side, it's the job applicants. If it's entry level people, it's students, it's local school systems, administrators, the universities, the local chambers, and all these people would have need to sort of understand where your company fits into the community and what its needs are. And take advantage of opportunities, even simply maybe to open your doors to the public. One thing on a manufacturing side that our department has been partnering on for several years now is a manufacturing day to deal with the long-term shortages and difficulties of hiring workers in manufacturing. First Friday of every October, and there's events throughout the country where essentially there's open houses for students, for schools to come in and understand what's being made in their communities and what career opportunities are available there. And it's a very powerful and useful event to get your name out there.
The other thing is brand is not optional. So you may be thinking, I'm going to focus on the compliance, make sure that the compensation is on par with the geography that we've selected. We're going to focus on all of these. If you decide to move brand to the side or make your culture something secondary, it will happen anyway. Because here in the States, we've got social media, we've got blogs. I guarantee you, as soon as you become an employer, you will have a profile in LinkedIn before you create the profile. You will have a profile in Glassdoor before you create the profile. So even if you have 2 or 3 employees to start with, they will then go online and say, hey, I worked for XYZ Corp. The leadership is not great, or they treat me like a number, or the opposite. This is a great organization. I wake up in the morning excited to go to work. So that brand is going to precede you.
And that's when they call me and say, how do I get this off Glassdoor? And it's a really difficult conversation. But we also talked about on LinkedIn the individual versus the corporate segment. And so follow up on that, because that to me was a really interesting conversation.
Right. So LinkedIn is the largest professional platform. They've definitely earned that distinction in the country. There are other social media outlets, but LinkedIn has distinguished itself as a thought leadership platform as well as a platform for jobs. So most of the times the professionals that you want to tap into, whether it's really, really specific technical skills for those hard to fill positions or even leaders within your organization, are going to have some level of LinkedIn presence. Gives you an opportunity from an individual basis to not only see who's out there, you can actually search your competitors in similar industries and see who their leaders are. These individuals will often share thought leadership or birds of a feather flock together or have other individuals that they're connected to. So it's a really good opportunity there. But LinkedIn also offers opportunities for employers to create their profiles so that you can own how you're projecting yourself and what your positions are in the marketplace. They did a study recently that 60% of the students who are currently in school actually are going to be in jobs that don't even exist today. So one of the things that is incumbent upon us is to think about what are the skills that we're looking for. So if you have a hard to fill position, those roles that are really technical, that you're not really quite sure when you've done that forecasting, you don't even know if the pipeline exists in your market, you may want to think about what are the things that you could teach and what are the things that you can't. Really good work ethic, really good thought process, analytical skills. If they've got those skills, then you can teach the technical components in most cases.
Which is a really good segue to technology and its impact on workforce. In fact, if you Google workforce development, the first 10 articles you're going to get are about technology. And they're about what is being replaced by robots and computers and what jobs are being replaced by those kinds of things. and what we are all not going to be doing in about 5 years. It's fascinating reading if you're bored some night, but it's an evolution thing, honestly, of if you want to say that the workforce isn't being impacted by technology, that hasn't been true for at least the 25 years I've been practicing law. When I started practicing law 25 years ago, there was a big, huge dictaphone on my desk. I didn't even have a computer. That's how much technology has impacted what we do over the 25 years I've been practicing law. And I think the next 25 years is even going to be more amazing. So, thoughts?
So, I mean, I'll start this one. So, on the technology side, I mean, there's the threat of the robots taking away our jobs, but there's also the complementary side of it as well, right? And what skills are actually will be needed more, what jobs will be enhanced and become more productive because of technology. And I think the idea of looking at sort of skills-based hiring and putting out what your needs are in terms of the skills required as opposed to specific credentials or specific certificates is in your favor to start thinking about that and getting ahead of some other companies. That's certainly the way U.S. policy is moving. It's the way we see businesses moving as well, because we see it's a shift away from, like, there's a tradition in the United States, you graduate from high school, you go to college, you get a 4-year degree, you start your job, and whatever it'll be, and you sort of move up your career. And a recognition that that pathway is not really adequate. It's actually exacerbating some labor shortages in this country. And there's an alternative, which is, different pathways to jobs through a community college, through apprenticeships, through stackable credentials, through there's an organization called Western Governors University, which has sort of breaks down degrees into small components, and it's all sort of basically coming down to what skills are required for jobs. And I think that's something that it's worth thinking about as you consider your hiring plans over the next 5 or 10 years.
When I think about technology in terms of workforce, I often think the age range of the employees, the industries, because obviously a tech firm is going to be, one would hope, far more savvy with their technology. And I'm speaking from the perspective of functioning at work, and other industries are way behind. Or your clients may have a different level of technological savvy than you do. So it becomes about making sure everyone understands and know that some people are going to come in and just be very comfortable and others are not. So just one example of that is we manage the expenses, employee expenses for our clients. We have a lovely app. You can do it online, you can take photos. It seems easy, even for someone my age-ish. But it's amazing how much time can be spent helping people understand it. They're all over the place, and you just have to be prepared for there to be different levels of understanding of technology.
And I would steer away, we all fall into it, from the labels of Gen Z and then making decisions based on that, because my kid's 76-year-old grandmother's on Facebook. So I try to, tell my daughter, what about Facebook? And she's like, I'm not going on Facebook. Grandma's on Facebook. So the paradigm is changing significantly. So what does that mean for us as organizational leaders? That means that mobile technology is becoming table stakes. My personal opinion is that there is a lot of fear that is somewhat unjustified around technology advancement. And the reason I say that is because there's not necessarily going to be job replacement because of bots or automation, but there will be some job displacement. So the way that you work is going to change. The individual in the organization, we do a lot of business process reengineering. So we get an opportunity to see what people are doing day to day. So that individual that spent maybe 10, 15 years comparing 2 Excel spreadsheets of data and then doing comparisons because 2 different departments have disparate systems that don't talk to each other. So it was that person's role to do that comparison. Now can have a bot in robotics process automation actually do that in a matter of seconds, right, or split seconds. So that doesn't mean that that person's job is going to be replaced, because that person has a significant amount of institutional knowledge. When you're implementing that technology, that's an opportunity to actually expand the role of that individual, to say, you know all of the anomalies. You know all the things that each department was doing that maybe they shouldn't have. So how do we elevate your role to think more strategically or help us come up with innovative approaches to how we're going to approach the market? So that's just a tactical example of where we have opportunities to really expand the scope. And I would imagine that that person that I'm talking about wakes up and maybe sits at the end of the bed in the morning and says, I got to compare the spreadsheets. Like, I got to make the donuts. Imagine, when that person wakes up to go to work the next day to say, now I'm actually in a meeting with some of the leaders around what I've been doing the last 10 years. So there's an opportunity to change the paradigm and get people excited about work.
And learn even more interesting new things, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, the doctors who were doing the surgeries with the robotics, I mean, that's kind of cool.
Listen, I love, in case you didn't notice, I love what I do. I love doing this in government. To see how technology is going into some of our state and local agencies that are doing child welfare, and caseworkers are going out for children in foster care and adoption, which I'm very passionate about, to see how they're leveraging some of these advanced predictive analytics to determine if a child is at risk based on data from DOE, based on data from the DHS, et cetera, and maybe some even statistical and income data to say there may be a higher likelihood and let the caseworkers use that. To me, that's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. That's amazing, and it changes the role of even a social worker or someone going to school for social work. So I just think the sky's the limit as far as how we can really leverage it.
So now this is the softball. This is the, what do your clients come to you with most often? How in this area of workforce development, I mean, what's the real, hey, this is what they come to me with, this is how I can help them the most?
For me, I'd say a couple of things. One is there's fear of trying something new, going to a new country. It's just the unknown. And so there's a bit of getting over the idea that it's okay to ask questions and feel a little silly and go, what's a W-2 and a 1099 and a 401k? And I mean, just imagine yourself pick a country somewhere else if from your home country, if you're in the US, and you go, I wouldn't understand it either. So I think, searching out those people that go, it's okay, you don't have to know it all at once. And many clients will say to me, the US is like 50 different countries. And when you're an American and you're used to it, you go, well, okay, this state's different than this, but it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So I think that's part of it, is just learning a little bit, finding trusted advisors and getting comfortable. The other thing I see is companies trying to do everything at once. So sometimes it's a little confusing about which thing you should do. Should I start an entity? Well, maybe co-employment is an option where you can have one or two employees in a much simpler way. So it's just investigating those things, and sometimes people will think, well, if I'm going to attract employees, I have to have this, 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 and this right away. And you don't. What you need is someone that understands in what order you do things, and sometimes you have to do them simultaneously. So, for example, if you want a key employee from your home country to reside in the US and you need a visa, then you want your visa and your starting your entity to go side by side. And understanding that when you make that decision, your tax complexities double, triple, they just, so, which do I get first? Do I get an attorney? Do I just go online and start the entity? Do I get tax advice first? So I think sort of some of that one is overwhelming, but then people think I just have to do it all. And sometimes when you make early decisions, you have to undo them a little down the road. So taking a moment to ask the questions before you leap and say, well, but I started a corporation in Delaware, so what do I do next? Is to, just, it's okay. Figure out what you want to do and collect the information, find the advisors, get the referrals to people in the U.S. that can help you.
So In the federal government, I don't really have clients per se, but I will say we have plenty of businesses that come in to share their opinions about federal policy in any number of areas, and which is great. It's good to get the feedback. But one thing I would say that is cross-cutting. We always hear about it from business leaders who meet our secretary and us as his staff as well, is on the workforce side and these common challenges they have in finding skilled talent. And from your perspective, what I think about is that there's your competitors are also potentially your partners in training workers. And so at a local level, there's people and companies that probably have the desire to hire people with a similar skill set, or maybe if they came together, they could actually work with local community colleges to develop a training program that would benefit everybody. And so the more quickly you become integrated in your community, identify these sort of competitors / partners, I think you could effectively solve that. And we have some examples we could share. I have friends at the U.S. Department of Labor who are in the government pavilion who could certainly talk to you about that with regard to apprenticeship programs, which are across every sector, every field, every industry in this country.
That's great. I think from my end, there are two big areas that I get asked about a lot. One is how do we compete? So we've got these roles to fill. I've got private sector organizations with buckets of cash that they can, use to attract. How do we get this same talent? And I think that that's an opportunity area because if you look at the demographics and the data for the talent that's in the work pipeline right today, it's not 100% based on compensation. So there are other areas for our mission-driven organizations to really leverage your brand to get people excited about working for your organization. If you're working in maybe a smaller business or in government, you have an opportunity to get hands-on experience that you wouldn't necessarily get at a large 200,000 person organization. So it's how you message the various roles. That's one question. And I think the other question is around, do I have the right people in the right jobs doing the right work? And how do I get them to, basically as you opened up, how do I get them excited about what they do? And that's probably like the two biggest questions that come to the table with our clients.
So I get called when there's a problem. So I would like to flip that around. I much would rather be on the preventative side. Call before there's a problem. Let's make sure we're paying people according to the law. Let's make sure we're training people ahead of time. Let's make sure we have the agreements that we need in place. So a little bit of preventative goes a long, long way of making sure you don't have to call me once people believe there is a real problem. And so that's what I would say is a little bit of thoughtfulness on the preventative side, because I do a lot on the preventative side. We do a lot of training. We do a lot of counseling. We do a lot of preparation of employment agreements. And that stuff is fantastic, especially if we get all of those in place. And sometimes you can't prevent everything. You can't. But it does go a long, long way. And if you put those good blocks in place, then even when you get an errant thing happening, it makes for good defenses in case something does kind of go awry.
And you make a great point with that, because I think sometimes people think, well, I'm going, now we're in the U.S. We have on our website, we have an address, a phone number, an employee, an office, whatever it is, and then you go tick. But things change all the time. So what was a good setup might be non-compliant in a whole bunch of different ways 6 months down the road. So I think considering your work in the U.S. as a work in progress, just like you would in your home country, but that's, lots of changes, and stay on the right side of the issues, to call Kim.
So to your point, that's an opportunity area as well. Job descriptions, especially when you have a smaller group or a smaller business unit, sometimes it's something that's overlooked, but it's really important to have a job description and keep that job description current so that you don't get that call and you can track an individual's performance to what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis.
Job descriptions are one of those things that protect you, particularly in how you pay people, because if you don't have them, then some of our governmental entities will look at it and say you're not paying them correctly. Anyway, we could go off on those tangents, but we won't. because we have just about what I think is the right amount of time to let you guys ask some questions. And that's why we have all these handy dandy microphones, I think, standing here. So I'm sure not all of you are shy, and I'm sure some of you have some questions. So somebody has to ask the first question. There we go.
Do I need a mic or?
I can hear you. You want? I can.
Matt Bench with Benchmark Strategies in Boston. I really like how you talked about building a culture from the beginning. Love to hear about how you build a job descriptions when a lot of the companies we work with are doing their first foothold, say 1 to 5 jobs, first 2 years, sign their U.S. anchor client, and now we're going to go from 5 to 50 or 5 to 100. So much of that is with that company's mindset in those first 5 hires, but making sure that they can help scale up. Love to hear feedback. Thank you very much.
So I don't know if everybody could hear the question, but the question is, you have 1 to 5, and then you're going from 5 to 50. How do you get job descriptions from the 5 to 50 mark put in place? And so some of that's strategic, right, and thoughtful, but some of that is working with the right advisors and legal to make sure you get those on paper. And that's going to be a work in progress too, frankly. But I highly recommend you get both the strategic people and the legal people so that you get it right. Because once you get into that 5 to 50 place, you're covered by all the statutes, you're covered by family medical leave, you're covered by all of that. And so you want to get it to make sure you get it right on paper. So you need your folks getting it like, this is what we're doing. This is what this person's actually doing. And that's the tweaking stage too, right? Because you're going from 5 to 50, it's going to change over time. But you need both the strategy people and the lawyers to get their heads together and get it right, get it on paper.
And I think also sometimes we accidentally scale because we've been very successful. And so sometimes you're a bit more reactive when it comes to those additional positions to fill. And you do want to be strategic and proactive, but you're doing so many things and bringing in lots of money. So how do you manage both? So at some point for companies that are growing, the center is the home country, and someone's looking over there to see what's happening. But I think part of it is knowing when you are going from the 5 to the 50 to say, do we need our U.S. CEO or a country manager and things like that. It's just exactly how you grew in your country. It's just further away, so it can feel a little out of control. And again, you want those legal people behind you. And it can waste, I shouldn't say waste, it doesn't waste time. It takes time to get some of these things right. So you have to be prepared for the fact that you're growing, and there are these people, the people in the company that are handling that, but you also have to attend to the boring admin things that can take some of your time, because spending some of that time early on is money well spent and will contribute to your further growth.
Oh, okay. There's someone.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
I am part of the engineering and construction industry. I would like to know if there is a kind of regulation or standard or a general agreement for the construction industry setting benefits and salaries. Thank you.
Wow, so let's see. That's so the answer is it depends. It depends on the size of your organization. It's still going to depend where you are in the country. So there's federal law, but states can say, well, that's not generous enough, or that's not, we want to hold to a higher standard. So there will be different standards, and you may have people in different parts of the country. So you have your U.S., you have your policy. This is what we offer. However, say in California, the rules are different than your headquarters in Massachusetts. And so you have to decide, are we going to follow the leave policy that California requires and apply it to everybody? Or are we going to say, this is our policy here, and we have to make changes for the different states that people are in? And I think that's a great time to go to an employment lawyer, because those kinds of things are very important to get right, so that you're in compliance everywhere and people don't feel like this employee is getting something different than that. So it's not easy to navigate, and there isn't one answer to say, if you do this, you'll be fine, in any industry.
From a learning perspective. Yes, exactly. Yeah, there could be variations by state. There, like she said, there's federal law, but then you do have to figure out where you're physically domiciled and what the state requirements are in that particular geography. But I will say that every sector has trade associations. So outside of some of the compulsory benefits, there are trade associations that dictate things like accreditation, certification, and how respected you are in that particular field. Construction is another area. So that may be the other side of what you want to look at as you look at learning and development programs, and also how to make sure the skills of your teams are constantly advancing. The last thing I'll mention is every organization, regardless of the sector, also has operations. So you may not necessarily compare with construction when you're looking at your finance team or your human resources team or operational team. You'll look at the leading organization around finance, et cetera.
So good morning, hello. I'm Matthias. I'm CEO and founder of a fitness chain in Germany or across Europe, headquartered in Munich. So we got business in Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I started here in the US. And I appreciate everything you said is 100% right. But our employees are mostly those millenniums. And I want to have an answer from you, because I got the impression you got skin in the game with that. I hear so many times here in the US, well, Matthias, listen, but Americans, that's different here, how we get paid. It's different how we get this and that. And I never have the right answer. I know what they mean. And I think to myself, do I need another person to explain to them that we know what they mean? So how can I react on that killing phrase? All is different.
Yeah.
Especially with the millenniums, because they are internationally connected already. They know what's going on.
Right.
I'm not sure if you got some advices for me, or maybe some other people who have the same.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. The first thing I would say is expand your aperture a bit and include millennials, Gen Z, or fresh talent, I'll just dub it that way, on your leadership team. So you may want to be creative around think tanks, opportunities for them. Listen, my nephew just graduated a couple of years ago. He spent time with one company because they offered free lunch. Like, that was exciting to him. All of his friends were jealous, so because they offered, literally, they had a big smorgasbord of lunch available. Flexible schedules, so the half-day Fridays are important. Creating think tanks, so even if they haven't earned the right to be formally on your leadership team, creating think tanks that allow them to share their point of view and their opinion, especially in the competitive fitness industry. They've got a ton of different ideas on how to innovate with customers coming in the door, how the sales process can be honed, and et cetera. And then that should inform your benefits process. So the same way you may have an annual census where you look at the benefits and you choose your benefits vendors, do a survey of your teams and say, what's important to you? When we did it at our firm, what was important was backup care for children. And so we were able to come up with a really creative backup care program. For if you have a different demographic within your respective organizations, do a survey. You will be so surprised at the things that your employees place value on, especially with some of the next gen talent. So I would say just be creative in how you're managing and make them feel like they are actually having input on how you're moving forward. Is that helpful?
And some of it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
Friday Jeans Day was huge because we all had to dress up the rest of the time.
Right.
It didn't cost anything. And when you're not seeing clients, Friday Jeans Day, implemented it, made people happy. Easy fix.
Go figure.
Go figure.
Yeah. we had a client that was trying to attract expats, and they thought they had to pay so much more for people to leave the U.S. and go in different locations. You want to know what they did? They actually created a very well socialized program. It's like a Habitat for Humanity, where there was a mission orientation. The amount of individuals, especially next-gen talent, who applied for that expat assignment after they heard that they were going to help impact a community skyrocketed. And that was without making the compensation changes. So I think there are creative ways to tap into the talent.
We have less than 5 minutes. Oh, good.
Thank you very much. You just touched on childcare. I'm in the state of Iowa, Clinton, Iowa, a relatively small community, and we've noticed within our manufacturing, we have dozens of manufacturing companies. When we did a survey, childcare became, for workforce development, one of the most serious issues, that people were missing work and we don't have enough providers in our community. Do you see any trends or best practices regarding that topic across the country that you could potentially share? What about childcare?
So I'm a mother of 5 children. I have a lot of responsibility in my role, and I also take care of my mother after my dad passed away. So I'm really passionate within our internal professional networks around workplace flexibility and those topics. And what we are seeing is that multi-generational requirement around taking care of parents and really needing that time. And so I think one way to address that is we give extra days for doctor's appointments and health. And even though you could use your PTO time, I think it sends a message to your teams that we recognize that this is a need that you have. And so they can take the time and kind of mark it that way. We also partner with an organization that provides what's called backup care. And a lot of organizations are beginning to do that, which means that I can call and have called at 6:30 in the morning with the projectile issues with the kids, and they can either send someone to your home for the day, or actually arrange for a local childcare, and they'll say that's available. Those are really good. In the U.S., we have a lot of days off from school. There are half days, there are, so having backup care to say, I've got a meeting and my child gets out of school, and having someone automatically on a 24-hour phone system coordinate backup care for you with a reliable, reputable provider is huge. And it's not only huge on the day that I needed it, but it's huge because that was so helpful to know that that was important to my employer to have that. The last thing I mentioned as far as that is we have a number of individuals, and this is global, with special needs. So those are IEP meetings, which is individualized educational programs at the school, or on the autism spectrum, or a myriad of different supports that the children may need. You will be surprised how many employees that you have that have children or family members at home with that. So you may want to look into those programs as well that provide support for educational support or for individuals on the spectrum.
In some ways, just to follow up on that, it can be a wonderful trade-off, because you think about wherever your company is based and the number of hours difference time zone-wise. So being flexible with people to, okay, let's check in. This has come up at school, so now I need to take my child to go here or there. And not everyone. Some are on the golf course, but I think we have an expectation that employees will be available at the end of the business day, wherever your home country is, and that this give and take is very valuable.
The one thing I would add to that, though, is shift work. In manufacturing, they're working 3 shifts, 24/7. So, when we're talking about people who work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, that's one thing. When you're talking about people who do shifts, that's what we run into. The problem is it's 2 o'clock in the morning and something's wrong.
Good point.
And that's for a lot of people in manufacturing, and you're working shifts, that's going to affect a lot of people. So it is very different from the 9 to 5.
Good point.
But I think you'll be surprised. It's a great point. You'd be surprised at how many providers are accommodating that. So I know when I was running a corrections to careers programs, corrections officers and nurses also have that same requirement. And there are daycare providers that are 24 hours. Maybe not in every geography. I don't know if it's in Iowa, but sometimes there are opportunities to create strategic alliances and partnerships. Great point, though.
All right. Well, we are down to 40 seconds. So we're going to say thank you very much for your attention. We've enjoyed being here very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.